I said I was just in Ann Arbor, listening to Mary Sue Coleman, and also watching the football team play. So every time I go to one of these Big Ten venues, and I've tried to go to all of them over the last 3 years. Some are more pleasant than others. But every time I go, I'm reminded of what a great, I know all of you think this. The polling shows us that Nebraskans love being part of the Big Ten. And the great thing is, every time I go to one of these venues, I hear how much they love having Nebraska in the Big Ten. Except maybe at the end of the game, like Saturday. But in fact, you go to Ann Arbor, and as soon as they see you in red, they start to recoil, but then they see you're not Ohio State, and so they say, you're okay. But it's reassuring that this was a great move to make, I think, for the university. And the other thing I learned, we went on a 2.5-hour campus tour Saturday morning, because we had a little time before the game, so we linked up with one of their tours just to see how they do it. And I become more and more convinced that our growth agenda is right as I go to these places like Minnesota and Penn State and Michigan and the other institutions in the Big Ten. These great research universities, public research universities, do tremendous things for the country, for the world, but first and foremost, they do it for their states and their regions. And we've been talking about this for years, about what size the university ought to be. And there's some people think, well, 25,000 for UNL is about right. Well, I don't really think so. I think as I look at this and see that we are by a long ways the smallest institution, to take out Northwestern, the smallest public institution in the Big Ten, and I think about all the things that attracting talent and keeping it does for a place. This is, why wouldn't you want more of this? Why wouldn't you want more research? Why wouldn't you want more smart faculty and smart students coming to your region, and a lot of them staying there when they graduate? It's all positive. So, I'm very excited about the growth agenda at UNL and throughout the university. Now, I did go to the Association of Land Grant and Public Universities board meeting from Ann Arbor. It was in Washington. And while I was at the meeting, the White House called and asked if a couple of presidents could come over and talk with them about the issues that the administration is talking about in terms of higher education. And you may have seen that yesterday they sort of launched a new initiative. The First Lady is taking on higher education, and they've announced some rating systems for higher education. So anyway, I was very interested because I want to talk a little bit about this, but I think the University of Nebraska is doing a lot of these things right. So I accepted the invitation to go over to the West Wing and meet with Gene Sperling, who's the chairman of the National Economic Council and the chief economic assistant to the president. What I didn't know is that he grew up in Ann Arbor and is a huge Michigan fan. So the first thing he said when we sat down was, Saturday night, I was thinking, what's about the last thing I would want to do now? Meet with the president of the University of Nebraska. So anyway, we got over that though, and we had a great meeting. One of the things that's good about being involved with these associations like APLU, the Land Grant One, or the Council on American Council on Education, is I get a chance to go meet with other presidents and spend a day or two and hear about what's going on in their venues and think about how we're doing. And I always go away from those meetings feeling good about what's happening here. And one of the more interesting things is to hear recently from one of my new colleagues in the Big Ten and in these national meetings is Mitch Daniels, who's the president of Purdue now. Now, Mitch was the head of the OMB, and then he was governor in Indiana. And he's a very articulate guy. You can tell why he'd be a good politician. He spoke at this meeting the other day, and he said, I'm always asked, you had this kind of a career and then you completely switched over and are doing something completely different. What's that like? And he said, well, when I was in Washington and when I was governor, my life was dog eat dog. Now it's just the opposite. He also talked, I was on Mitch and I spoke at a Gallup event together when he'd been president for only a few months. So he deferred all the difficult questions to me. You know, there is, but he's got a big change agenda, as everyone in higher education does now. I have to. But I'm going to tell you one more story I thought was amusing, because I'm not very good at writing jokes, so I'm going to just steal his. Anyway, everybody's talking about change in higher education, and what we are criticized sometimes for is the pace of change. He said, after I got to Purdue, it's a little like the story about the turtle that is mugged by a marauding band of snails. And the police officer came and said, "Who did this to you?" He said, "You know, I can't tell you, it all happened so fast." Anyway, okay. Now I'm done with Mitch for a while. So all of you read the papers like I do and see nationally, and of course the Obama administration I think is directing some attention to this, and not all bad. But the question that is being posed all the time in the national media, maybe not so much in the local media, I hope, because they are aware of what's going on here. Cost. You know, does it cost too much? Is the cost escalating too quickly? Tuition going out of sight. The debt levels. We know now that there's more college debt in the country than there is credit card debt. And is that crippling young working population coming out of college? And finally, the question that kind of hits the hardest is college worth it anymore? So I'm going to say a little bit about each of those very quickly. Tuition. At Nebraska, we've made it a goal over the last decade to keep tuition increases modest and predictable. We said, you know, nobody likes to see tuition increases, but there are costs associated with a heavily labor-intensive, heavily talent-intensive business. And we're trying to do what we can with technology, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But we've been pretty successful with this. Each of our campuses is at the low end of its peers in terms of tuition. UNL is dead last in the Big Ten in terms of tuition comparisons. Now we've frozen tuition for all Nebraskans for 2 years. So if you're a Nebraska student and you're going to attend UNL, if we just looked at the cost increases over the last 10 years and took an annual average increase, don't increase at all, you save $1,000 over those 2 years on tuition. So we are going to continue, I think, to be among the most competitive and, in my mind, the greatest value in terms of public higher education among our competitors. And we're thinking about all kinds of other things. One of the things that I've become interested in recently, and we might have talked more about doing it this year if it weren't for the tuition freeze, which I'm very happy about. I love going around talking to Nebraska students and their parents and prospective students about the fact that your tuition will not change over 2 years. But one of the things we've been thinking about is something like block tuition, which is being used now at a couple of places where they charge one rate of tuition. You might say 15 credit hours, you pay for that. So if you're a student thinking about taking 12, 13, 14, but you're paying for 15, well, you might take 15 because you're already paying for it. Or if you're taking 18 credit hours, you just got 3 free credit hours. So there's an economic incentive. Now it's all about, it really gives us a chance to have more predictable budgeting, but that's not the reason you would do it. The reason you would do it is to encourage these students to take 15 credit hours a semester so that over 4 years they're on path to graduate. And one of the other things that we did recently was in the last year or two, the Board of Regents adopted a recommendation of ours to cap credit hours at 120. I mean, there's been a lot of creep in credit hours across disciplines. Majors are important. The people providing them know how important they are, and they want you to get as much experience in your field as you can. But that has to be balanced against reasonable ability to graduate in a timely way. So what we said is we're going to cap credit hours at 120. And so if you're a student and you take 15 credit hours a semester for 8 semesters, you have enough credits to graduate. So that's another change that we've made recently to encourage timely graduation. Debt. So nobody likes debt, but the question is it too high for what you're investing in? Now, our debt's lower than the national average. It's significantly lower than the Big Ten average. In fact, the amount of our debt, on average, that an undergraduate leaves with is about the same amount that we are told that, on average, a college graduate makes over what a high school graduate makes. So, I'll try to say that in a way that is easier so Rich can understand it. What that means is, this nationwide, what we're told is, if you have a college degree, you're going to make, on average, $20,000 a year more than if you have a high school diploma. And that's about the debt load you leave. It's a little more, it's about $21,000 that you leave the University of Nebraska with on average. So, is that an investment that's worth it? The annual difference in income, on average, being the amount of that debt. Is college worth it? This one really slays me. And in fact, we've done some of our own testing on this in Nebraska, and the numbers are going down in terms of people who believe that a college degree is necessary, which is surprising because the research shows us that nationally and in Nebraska, the importance of getting a college degree is going up right now, not going down. So I'm not sure why people think it's not worth it. Take about any objective measure that you get. I mean, look at unemployment rates during the recession. They're about half for college graduates that they were for people without a college degree. Look at the earning potential. About $20,000 a year, about $1 million over a lifetime is the estimate of the value of a college degree on average. It goes up if you have a professional degree or advanced degree. And you look at the other measures that are a little less tangible. Health. College graduates have better health. They have lower health care costs. They have lower rates of incarceration. They make lower demands on social infrastructure. All kinds of positive things correlate positively with a college degree. So I think it's more worth it today than it ever has been. You know, there's a study from the Georgetown Center on Education and the Workforce, or something like that, which is sort of the gold standard in terms of research on educational value and workforce needs. And Nebraska, out of 50 states, I have people come to me and say, well, that's nationally, yes, we know higher education is really important, but not so in Nebraska. We've got all these kinds of jobs that don't require it. Well, Nebraska ranks 7th among 50 states in the need for more education beyond high school by 2018, 7th. It's not necessarily just a college, not a 4-year college degree, but some education beyond high school. I for one, think there is value for almost any education beyond high school, whether it's corporate training programs, community colleges, university, or beyond. Now, I use one example, which I'm not sure is a very good one. So name a Nebraskan, a University of Nebraska alumnus, who had his picture on the front of more papers in the world last week than anyone else. Who? Evan Williams. That's right. I think last estimate were that in the IPO for Twitter, he stands to make $2.6 billion based on the initial closing price on the stock. Now, Evan is from a small town in Nebraska and went to college at the University of Nebraska. Now, this may not be our greatest success story because he only went 1 year, but it gave me a great, so that's pretty good value. Think what happens if you go 4 years. But it did give me a year or so ago, and I didn't realize how prescient this would be. A year or so ago when I saw Bill Gates, I told him that there's a pretty easy way to test the value of higher education, and Nebraska was here and Harvard was here. I mean, it took him 2 years at Harvard before he was ready to found Microsoft. Evan, 1 year at Nebraska. and now he's had two great successes. So if we agree, and if you don't agree, you can ask me questions in just a minute or offer rebuttal, that higher education is valuable, and we ought to have more of it. Frankly, I want to win the talent war. I want Nebraska to win the talent war. I want more smart people moving to Nebraska to get an education and to stay here. And that's one of the reasons that, to my mind, that's the biggest reason for growth of the university. So how do we get there? You know, the high school graduates in Nebraska, pretty flat. Even has been going down for a couple of years, and then will, I think, go up again gradually. But that isn't where we're going to make all the difference. But there are some areas there where we're going to make a difference. First of all, we're going to increase the college going rate for Nebraskans in general. You know, when we started the P16 Commission a few years ago, Richard mentioned that I am the co-chair, the governor's the chair. We asked him to chair it because we thought it was really important that the state's political leader would be invested in this and have this be a part of his agenda. We were 17th in the nation in college going, and we said we want to be in the top 10. Now, I don't know that we can take all the credit for this, but today we're 7th in the nation in college going. So I think we can move the needle on the percentage of Nebraskans who go on to college. That's one. Part of that, an important part of that, is disproportionately, we are underrepresented in African American, Latino groups going on to college. We want to move that. We want to get that continuation rate to be the same for the entire population. So that's one way we do this in Nebraska. Another way that we increase it and help win the talent war is attracting more out-of-state students. You know, the biggest source of students outside Nebraska at UNL is South Dakota. And the last time I looked, we got about 500 students from South Dakota. That's probably within 100 either way of being right today. I haven't seen the numbers for this year. The biggest source of students for the University of Iowa, which isn't that much bigger, it's the next smallest public institution in the Big Ten. The biggest source of out-of-state students for them is Illinois. I think it's 6,000. So I would like that number to go up, because I think that we have a lot better chance of having a 22-year-old smart person live in Nebraska if they just went to college here for 4 years than if they'd never stepped foot in the state. So that's another way we can do it, and I think we can make a big difference there, in part because of the value proposition at the University of Nebraska. A third area is international. And I would like to talk more about this, but I don't have time, but I'll come, if anybody asks a question about it, I will. But we have an aggressive set of goals on global engagement. I, for one, feel that this is like an internship in this century. That every student I talk to who has gone abroad says it changed their life. And in my view, they are wise well beyond the 6 months or the year they spent studying abroad. But I also feel it's a huge benefit for us to increase the number of students from abroad who are studying here. This ought to be a national agenda for us. It's the best form of diplomacy we have, I think. It's also a great way to get talent in this country and talent at the University of Nebraska, and we have a goal of doubling the number of international students. We have about 3,600 today, and we'd like to double that number. Finally, online. We have an aggressive program with an entity that we call Online Worldwide, which is a platform for all of our campuses to offer their courses. We have about 1,400 of them online. We have over 100 degree programs online now. So this is another way that we're going to get students from all over the world with a brand promise that you get a University of Nebraska education, University of Nebraska faculty, the same ones who are in the classroom, and you get it for a price that is more competitive than most of the alternatives. And if we have a chance, we'll talk a little bit about MOOCs maybe and the change in the world that technology is bringing. I want Nebraska to be at the front of that, not the back of that train. I'll say a couple more things and then see if there are any questions or any rebuttal. I talked a little bit about the value proposition. I talked a little bit about growth at the university. I want to talk a little bit now for a few minutes about what it means to be a land-grant university in the 21st century. So we just celebrated, as I mentioned in my embarrassing story about C-SPAN, the 150th anniversary of the land-grant, 1862. Abraham Lincoln signed the Land Grant Act, the Morrill Act, in the middle of the Civil War. Probably, in my view, the most important piece of legislation affecting education in this country's history. It did a number of things. It opened the doors to access for the sons and daughters of mill workers and farmers, which is what we're about today, expanding access. It focused on research that was relevant and important to the states and the regions and the country, especially at that time on agriculture and engineering, and we're still doing that today. And it had a goal of pushing this information out, originally through agriculture extension, but then industrial extension and other ways that we now connect. That we get up in the morning every day and think about public-private partnerships today in ways that we never did before. Innovation Campus is one example, but you could look at many, many examples across the university of the deeper partnerships that we are trying to develop with the private sector. That was the whole point of this 2-year national commission that I chaired on innovation and economic prosperity. It was about linkages with the private sector. So is the land grant still relevant in the 21st century? It did a great job. If you were a farmer, you probably know, well, maybe you weren't around in 1862, but average corn yield was about 20 bushels per acre. So it's over 10 times that now, and a lot of that is because of new technology and science that came out of universities. So I think that the mission is every bit as important today, but in my view it's global. And in my view, the challenges that face the world in many ways also face Nebraska. And so one of the things we've tried to do is organize ourselves in a new set of initiatives and areas for growth and research around these grand challenges. Not only do we think that we can contribute to solving them, and that'll be good for the world and good for Nebraska, but we think it will bring energy to our efforts that will interest students and our faculty. We think Nebraska is doing something very special. So in our capital campaign, one of the things we did was focus on a number of these challenges. So we built a new institute for water for food with a huge gift that set up this Institute for Water for Food. I'll give you one example of why this is important, or actually it's probably a couple. Nebraska is the most heavily irrigated state in the nation, ahead of California and Texas now. Nebraska is the birthplace of high-pressure irrigation, and the 4 largest companies in the country and the largest one in the world are in Nebraska. Agriculture is always going to be important here. So that's on the Nebraska side and why it's important. Also, we sit above the nation, the continent's largest resource for fresh water. If you look at the world, 2 billion more people over the next 40 years. We go from 7 billion to 9 billion. Because of the changing, the growing middle class around the world, the demands for protein go up. So because of that demand, instead of just increasing to meet that $2 billion addition, we have to double the food production in the world to get to the protein levels that will be demanded globally. And we have to do that with a decreasing, probably, amount of arable land, because at the same time, cities are going to grow and take more farmland. And we do it with what I hope isn't a declining, but a finite amount of water. This is one of my favorite statistics. 97% of the world's water is salt water, so there's 3% left. 2/3 of that is frozen. So there's 1% of the world's water that's fresh, non-frozen water. And over 2/3 of the demand for that is agriculture. So if you think, what's an area where we can be relevant in solving one of the biggest challenges facing the world? It's water for agriculture. And we are becoming the epicenter for that. We have hired some of the best people in the world. We already had great faculty to build on. You take another, the early childhood. I mean, this was not something, when I first started about 10 years ago, I was asked at one of these things what I thought about early childhood education. I thought they were talking about freshmen who were coming in. I have learned a lot over the last 10 years. I've had some very good teachers. Susie Buffett's been one of them. When she says, you should go here and see what this person says, I go. So I've learned a lot about brain science and how the most rapid development in the brains in the first few years, that the vocabulary of a typical middle class child and a typical child in poverty The middle class child's vocabulary is twice by 3 what the child in poverty is. The payback, a guy, Jim Heckman at the University of Chicago, won a Nobel Prize for this. And Chicago's business school is not a very squishy, soft place. He won a Nobel Prize for demonstrating that the payback in education is greatest in the first few years, 7-to-1 payback. So we started the Buffett Early Childhood Institute at the University of Nebraska. We hired one of the best guys in the world, a guy named Sam Meisels from the Erickson Institute in Chicago, which was the leading place in the world. On one of these trips that I took to learn about early childhood, I went to Erickson 4 years ago. And I walked around, I went in their classrooms, I had lunch with Sam Meisels, and on the way back to the airport I said, that's the guy we should hire to head the new Buffett, we didn't even have one yet, but the new Buffett Institute. And we tried, and he said no, and we did our search. And then we came back later, and we demonstrated for him how Nebraska was committed to leading the world in this area, and he came. And now he's attracting other terrific people to Nebraska. And we could say the same thing for this Rural Futures Institute that we have just started, that had a conference last week where the Secretary of Agriculture was here, and people around the world are taking notice. We say the same thing about cancer prevention and research and treatment, where we have an National Institutes of Health, National Cancer Institute designated center, but we want to be a comprehensive center. We want to join those 40 institutions in the country that many of them you know by name because of what they are, Mayo, MD Anderson, Sloan Kettering. We want to be among the best anywhere in this area. 1 out of 2 Nebraskans are affected with cancer. This is something that matters deeply here, and it matters all over the world. So this is something that gets me excited every day about being president of the University of Nebraska. We're doing great things in our value proposition for students. We are doing a terrific job of educating undergraduates and graduate students, and I think we're doing a better job every day of developing public-private partnerships that matter to local businesses and that make our students better when they graduate. But the other thing I think we're doing, and this is the heritage of the University of Nebraska, we were involved in this, setting up the first land-granted university in Turkey in the 1950s. I have a big picture in my conference room of Cliff Harden signing an agreement with the Turkish leaders to create this university. So we've been in this space. This is something that is terrific for us, but it's also terrific for the world. And when people talk about, why are you focused on the globe instead of just Nebraska? Well, in this Water for Food Institute, for example, we have people from China and India and Brazil who are partnering with us, the best scientists in this area, because they want to be part of the same effort that we're involved in. That makes our work better, makes our faculty gives them the opportunity to partner with the strongest people in the world in their field, and makes our students better. And at the end of the day, we are going to be part of addressing some of these great challenges that face the world. And that's a great thing for the University of Nebraska, and I hope something that all of you agree is what this great land-grant university ought to be about. Thanks very much. Appreciate the chance to visit with you. If this is anything like Rotary, people just start getting up and leaving as soon as they need to. So you can do that, but we have about 4 minutes. So them and 2 questions. I don't think we'll get it done that fast, but I'd be happy to. Yeah.
Could you say something more about the massive online courses that are starting up now? The challenges that poses to getting enrollment to 30,000 at the University of Nebraska, Milliken, is the first one, and the role that that might play in some of the other.
Well, to start with, we don't live in a vacuum. So I want us to be a part of the educational change in this country and not just trying to preserve something that may have been a 1990s model. So to the extent technology is going to transform opportunities in education, I want Nebraska to be a part of that. Part of our enrollment numbers include online. So we're very successful. We've been growing in double digits in our online offerings, and that's education in Nebraska. We have almost 300,000 Nebraskans that have some college credit but no degree. So this is one of the ways we can provide opportunity to them. But it's also a way for Nebraska to build its platform around the world. So I'm very interested in our online offerings. MOOCs will you know, they have the potential to transform things tremendously. They have the potential to provide state-of-the-art experience with some of the leading faculty in the world, especially at, it strikes me, especially at some of the entry-level courses. It's not there yet. We're a partner with Coursera, which is the largest MOOC platform, because I wanted our faculty to have the opportunity, if they were interested, to produce classes for Coursera, and also for us to have the opportunity, as most other great universities in this country have right now, because most of the great universities are involved with one or the other of these MOOCs. I wanted our faculty, our campuses, to have the opportunity to participate on the receiving end if they thought it would add value. So far, we haven't seen the product that's going to change the world. We may be seeing the closest thing right now in Georgia. Georgia Tech, with a couple $1 million investment from AT&T, is creating a master's degree all online in electrical engineering for $7,600. It's easily a top 10 engineering school in the country. This may be the first of these MOOCs that I think has the potential to start to transform the landscape in this. I don't know where this is going to be. My friend, a colleague, former colleague at Ohio State, who would say just about anything that popped into his head. At this point, we were on a panel together, and he was asked why they had joined Coursera, this MOOC, and he said, the train was leaving the station, and I figured better to be on the train than standing on the platform. I would say it a little differently than that. In fact, I'd say a lot of things he says a little differently. But in this case, I would say I want us to be at the front edge, the cutting edge of understanding how technology has the potential to transform education and using it where it's appropriate to increase learning, student learning, and time to degree at Nebraska. And so if we can do that, then we ought to be taking advantage of it. But I'm like most people. If they tell you they know exactly how it's going to change higher ed or Nebraska specifically, I wouldn't listen to them, because I don't know anybody that knows exactly how it's going to do it. But I want us to be a part of it. I want us to be sitting at the table trying to understand the benefits it might offer to us. Time for half a question. Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate it.